Disclaimer: this content is intended for mature audiences only. Viewer discretion is advised. It started as an ordinary evening, the kind of night when everything in the house feels too quiet, almost unnerving. I was walking down the hallway, lost in thought, when I noticed something unusual. My bedroom door was slightly open, and the faint glow of a lamp spilled into the hallway. At first, I brushed it off, thinking maybe I had forgotten to turn the light off earlier. But when I pushed the door open just a little more, I froze. Lying there, comfortably stretched out on my bed as though it belonged to him, was my stepson. He was 22, old enough to know better, yet there he was, looking at me with a mix of guilt and defiance in his eyes. That one moment caught me completely off guard. 1,000 thoughts ran through my mind. Why was he in my bed? What was he thinking? I wanted to be stern, to demand answers right then and there, but instead, something stopped me. The look in his eyes wasn't just mischief, it was something deeper, something that made my heart race in ways I didn't expect. That silent stare between us felt heavier than any words. As I stood there, trying to process what I was seeing, a tension grew that was hard to ignore. It wasn't just about the bed anymore. It was about the unspoken feelings, the boundaries being tested, and the dangerous curiosity rising inside me. My voice caught in my throat as I finally asked, "What are you doing here?" But instead of an explanation, he simply shifted slightly, as though daring me to come closer. I could feel my pulse in my ears. The air in the room seemed to thicken with every second that passed. There was a part of me screaming to turn around, to walk out, to end the moment before it began. But there was also a part of me, one I wasn't ready to admit even to myself, that wanted to see where this would go. That part whispered that maybe this wasn't a mistake, maybe it was something we were both silently drawn to all along. The house outside that bedroom remained still. Nobody else was around to witness the quiet storm building inside. It was just the two of us, caught in this unexpected moment of truth, with a choice hanging heavily in the air. Do I set the boundary and push him away, or do I step into the unknown? I stood there longer than I should have, still trying to make sense of what I had just walked into. The silence between us was almost louder than words. My stepson didn't move, didn't apologize, didn't even try to explain himself. Instead, he simply held my gaze like he was waiting for me to decide what would happen next. That quiet confidence in his expression unsettled me. I couldn't understand why he looked so calm when he had clearly crossed a line. I finally stepped into the room, the floorboards creaking under my weight. He shifted slightly on the bed, but still didn't say anything. The history we shared suddenly flooded my mind. I remembered when he first became part of my life. He was already an adult, independent, with his own way of seeing the world. We had never been especially close, but we weren't distant either. He was respectful most of the time, though he had a streak of stubbornness that reminded me of someone who always wanted to push boundaries. Maybe this moment was an extension of that, or maybe it was something else entirely. I sat down on the edge of the bed, careful to keep some distance between us. My heart was racing, but I tried to keep my voice steady. I asked again why he was there, but his answer was vague, almost teasing. He said he had just been tired, that my room felt different, warmer, calmer than his. The excuse didn't feel real, yet there was something in his tone that made me wonder if there was a hidden meaning behind it. The longer I stayed in that room, the more I realized how complicated things had become. It wasn't just about a bed. It was about how the lines between us were starting to blur in ways I never expected. There was a subtle closeness that had built up over time, little moments in the kitchen when our hands brushed, the way he lingered a bit too long when saying goodnight, or how his compliments sometimes carried a weight that felt different from casual kindness. At the time, I told myself I was imagining it, but now, sitting there with him lying on my bed, I wasn't so sure anymore. I knew I should get up, walk out, and re-establish the distance that was quickly fading. But the truth was, part of me didn't want to. There was something about the way he looked at me, like he was waiting for me to give in to something unspoken. That gaze made me question myself in ways I hadn't before. I could almost hear the words he wasn't saying, and the silence between us grew heavier with every passing second. I leaned back slightly, trying to regain control of my emotions. My mind kept going back and forth. Was this a harmless mistake, or was it the beginning of something I wasn't ready to admit? I thought about how people would judge, how messy things could get, how easy it would be to ruin everything. Yet beneath all that fear, there was also curiosity, an ache to understand what he really wanted and why he had chosen my bed of all places. The question lingered in the air, "Do you want me to leave?" And it echoed louder in my mind than any answer I could give. His voice carried a calmness that didn't match the storm churning inside me. I knew what the right thing to say was, but when I opened my mouth, no words came out. My silence was dangerous, because it left space for meaning, for possibilities, for him to wonder if my hesitation was permission. I looked at him, stretched out on the bed that had always been mine alone. The soft light from the lamp highlighted the sharpness of his jaw, the steady rhythm of his breathing, the way he didn't flinch under my stare. It struck me then how different he was from the young man who once lived more in his own world. He wasn't a boy anymore. He carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who knew exactly how his presence could affect a room, and right now, that presence was testing every ounce of restraint I had. A part of me wanted to laugh it off, to brush away the tension and pretend it was nothing. But another part, the part one couldn't ignore, wondered if this moment was a culmination of something building between us for months. The casual touches, the unspoken glances, the times he had lingered in conversations when everyone else had gone to bed, it all suddenly fit together like pieces of a puzzle I had refused to see. I leaned forward, elbows resting on my knees, trying to gather my thoughts. He shifted slightly, his arm brushing against mine as though by accident, but we both knew it wasn't. The contact was small, fleeting, but it carried weight. That single moment of touch told me more than any confession could have. He was pushing boundaries, waiting to see if I would push back or let them crumble. The conflict was tearing at me. On one hand, I wanted to set things straight, to remind him of the roles we were supposed to play, the walls that kept us safe. On the other hand, curiosity tugged at me. What if I let those walls down, just for a second? What would happen if I answered his question with silence, with action, instead of words? That thought scared me as much as it thrilled me. At the same time, there were subplots threading themselves into the larger story. His relationship with me wasn't just about what was happening in that room. He had been distant with others lately, quieter at dinners, always finding excuses to stay around when I was alone. Was that intentional? Was I imagining it? I also thought about how others in the family might see this closeness if they ever noticed. Would they think it was innocent, or would they sense the unspoken tension too? The weight of consequences pressed down on me, yet the pull of the moment was stronger. I could almost hear two voices in my head, one begging me to walk away, the other urging me to stay seated, to see how far this unspoken connection would go. The danger of stepping into something we couldn't undo was real, but so was the danger of pretending it didn't exist at all. He looked at me again, eyes steady, almost searching. And for the first time, I realized he wasn't just asking me to decide for him. He was forcing me to decide for myself. The choice wasn't simple, and maybe that's what made it so powerful. The silence in that room felt like it could swallow me whole. His questions still hung in the air, but now it wasn't just a simple choice, it had turned into a battle inside me. I kept telling myself to stand up, to put an end to it before it went too far, yet my body refused to move. The tension between us was electric, filling every corner of the space. I could feel the air grow warmer, heavier, as though the room itself was waiting for me to decide. He didn't press me, didn't rush for an answer. Instead, he stayed still, calm, almost patient, and that calmness unsettled me more than anything else. It was like he knew time was on his side, that my hesitation would eventually bend toward him. The quiet confidence in his eyes was disarming, and the longer I looked at him, the more I realized how much power he had in that moment. I shifted on the bed, trying to put space between us, but every time I moved, it felt like the distance only pulled us closer in another way. The light flickered slightly from the lamp, casting shadows across his face, making his expression unreadable. Was he daring me to make the next move, or was he simply waiting for me to send him away? Either way, the decision was mine, and that responsibility was almost unbearable. Memories flashed in my mind, tiny, seemingly meaningless moments that now felt like foreshadowing. The late-night conversations that went on too long. The way his voice sometimes softened when he spoke only to me. The lingering glances when no one else was watching. None of those things had crossed the line on their own, but together, they built a pattern I could no longer ignore. Had this moment been inevitable all along? Or was I just reading too much into everything because I was caught in the heat of it now? The weight of what could happen next pressed down harder. If I told him to leave, everything would go back to the way it had been, or at least it would look that way on the surface. But deep inside, the memory of this night would always remain, unspoken but impossible to forget. If I let him stay, if I gave in even for a moment, everything would change forever. The line we had been balancing on would vanish completely. He finally sat up, closing the space just slightly, enough to make my breath catch. His voice was low when he spoke again, but every word carried a charge. "You still haven't answered me." That single sentence was the breaking point, the spark that could set everything on fire. My heart pounded as the world outside the room faded away. Nothing else mattered except this moment, this choice, this impossible pull between what was right and what I secretly wanted. And, just like that, we were on the edge of something neither of us could undo. The words, "You still haven't answered me," seemed to linger in the air long after he said them, echoing through the silence of the room. My chest tightened, and I could hear the sound of my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I was on the verge of answering, on the edge of making a choice I knew I could never take back, when suddenly something unexpected broke through the moment. A soft knock rattled at the door, sharp enough to jolt me from the pull of his eyes. My body tensed, and I froze where I sat. He stiffened too, his expression shifting from calm confidence to sudden alarm. We didn't move, both of us listening, waiting. The knock came again, this time a little louder, followed by a voice calling my name. It was his father. That single realization sent a shock through me, a reminder of the life outside this bedroom, the relationships and promises I was supposed to be holding together. In an instant, the weight of the situation doubled. It wasn't just about me and him anymore, it was about what would happen if anyone else found out. The tension that had felt heavy before now became almost unbearable. My stepson's eyes darted to mine, silently asking me to stay quiet, to keep the moment hidden. I called out, forcing my voice to sound steady, telling his father that I was fine, that I just needed a little space. The footsteps faded, but the interruption left a mark. The stakes had changed. What was once just a private choice between the two of us was now a dangerous secret that could explode at any moment. That twist of fear didn't erase the pull I felt toward him, it only intensified it. Because now it wasn't just a question of boundaries, it was about trust, about how far we were willing to go to keep something hidden. The silence after his father walked away felt different from before. It wasn't heavy with curiosity anymore, it was electric with danger. My stepson leaned closer, lowering his voice so it was barely more than a whisper. "See? This is why I asked you. We don't have much time." His words weren't just about the moment. They carried an urgency, like he had thought about this before, like he had been waiting for it to happen. That was the second twist I hadn't expected. It wasn't spontaneous for him. This wasn't just a reckless decision made in the heat of the moment. This was something he had been planning, maybe even hoping for. The realization both scared me and pulled me deeper in. How long had he been feeling this way? How many times had I missed the signs, brushed off the moments that now seemed so clear? The conflict grew sharper in my mind. If I let things go further, we would be tangled in a secret that could destroy everything if it ever came out. If I pushed him away, the chance to understand what had been simmering between us would vanish forever, leaving us both haunted by what-ifs. The risk wasn't just about us anymore, it was about the fragile balance of the family around us, the relationships that would never survive if this truth was exposed. He looked at me again, searching my face for any sign of an answer. I could see the mix of determination and vulnerability in his expression, a dangerous combination that pulled at me in ways I didn't want to admit. He didn't need to say another word, I knew what he wanted, what he was asking for. And the truth was, I was no longer sure if I had the strength to resist it. The stakes had never been higher. One choice could lead us deeper into a secret that could consume us both, while the other could break something inside us we might never repair. The tension built like a storm about to break, and I realized we were no longer just standing at the edge, we were being pulled over it. The room felt smaller than ever, as though the walls were closing in on us. His eyes never left mine, steady and unrelenting, demanding an answer I could no longer postpone. My silence had carried us this far, but now the weight of the choice pressed so hard on my chest that I could barely breathe. I knew whatever I did next would change everything. I finally spoke, my voice low but clear. I told him this couldn't continue, that lines existed for a reason, that once they were crossed there would be no turning back. For a moment, his face hardened, like my words cut deeper than he expected. Then, slowly, he leaned back against the headboard, studying me, almost as if he were trying to decide if I truly meant it. The tension was unbearable. He asked me one more time if I was sure, and when I nodded, the air in the room shifted. He let out a slow breath, and I could see the storm behind his calm exterior. But just as I thought the moment had passed, he said something that stopped me cold. "I wasn't lying in your bed by accident," he confessed. "I wanted you to find me. I wanted you to know." Those words landed like a blow. All the unanswered questions, all the subtle moments that had built up between us, it was never coincidence. He had been testing me, drawing me closer, waiting for this very night. The truth should have made it easier to walk away, but instead, it tangled me deeper into the knot of emotions I was trying so hard to escape. I stood up, my legs shaky, telling him again that it was over, that we couldn't keep feeding something that would destroy more than just us. But before I could take a step, the door opened. His father stood there, his eyes darting between us, confusion written all over his face. My heart stopped. For a split second, I was sure the secret had been exposed. But then, unexpectedly, my stepson spoke with a calmness that shocked me. He told his father he had just come to talk, that we were sorting through some family matters. The explanation was thin, but believable enough in the moment. His father nodded, hesitant but accepting, before closing the door again. The danger had passed, but the truth between us remained, heavier than ever. That was the real twist. The secret was no longer just about temptation. It was about what we now carried together, a truth that could never be spoken yet would forever change how we looked at each other. I walked out of the room that night, but I knew nothing would ever feel the same again. Walking out of that room felt like stepping into another version of my life, one I hadn't planned on but could no longer avoid. The secret we now carried sat like a shadow between us, a constant reminder of how close we had come to losing everything. In the days that followed, I found myself replaying that night in my head over and over. Every glance, every word, every silence felt like a thread that tied us together in ways neither of us could admit aloud. But with the closeness came distance too. Around the family table, things looked the same from the outside. Conversations flowed, laughter came and went, yet beneath it all, there was a new undercurrent I couldn't ignore. His eyes sometimes met mine across the room, brief and heavy with meaning, but we both looked away before anyone could notice. We didn't speak of it again. That silence was our unspoken agreement, a fragile truce meant to protect what we had left. The subplot that had started quietly, his shift in behavior, his late-night conversations, his subtle closeness, suddenly made sense to me. He had been building toward that night all along, waiting to see if I would acknowledge the tension we both felt. Now I understood him better, but understanding didn't make the weight any easier to carry. If anything, it made it harder, because I realized the story wasn't about one reckless choice, it was about emotions simmering under the surface for far longer than I was willing to admit. The reflection came in waves. I thought about loyalty, about boundaries, about how easy it is to confuse affection with something deeper when lines blur. I also thought about the cost of silence, about how a secret can live quietly between two people but still shift the ground beneath their feet forever. In the end, the resolution wasn't dramatic. There was no big confession, no confrontation, no explosive ending. The resolution was the choice to protect the life around us, even if it meant carrying the memory like a quiet scar. That night taught me that some choices aren't about what we want, they're about what we can live with afterward. And though I'll never forget the way his voice sounded when he asked, "Do you want me to leave?" I'll also never forget the choice I made when I finally walked away. So here's where I leave you, the audience. Do you think silence was the right answer? Or should the truth have been faced, no matter the cost? Comment below with your thoughts, and let me know if you'd want to see a sequel that explores what happens if secrets like these can't stay buried. Summary: a story of temptation, silence, and unspoken boundaries. When an ordinary night takes a shocking turn, one decision changes the balance of trust, romance, and family forever. Faced with a choice that could destroy everything, the narrator must decide whether to protect the life they've built or step into the unknown. 1.